So this one's about stigma in mental health staff groups. Because we tend to think that mental health staff know better, but there have been some instances in my life where it's been clear to me that there are problematic attitudes within very experienced NHS staff circles. So I've got two stories. The first is when I went for an interview for my healthcare assistant job in acute inpatient. I was interviewed by two people. One was my future manager, and one was his boss. And his boss didn't say very much. Most of the questioning came from my future manager, and at the end of that interview, when I walked away, I shook the senior manager's hand and smiled at her and said it was really nice to meet you. And she actually ripped her hand out of mine, almost like a reflex, like a disgust response. She clearly gave it a good old go. She tried to shake my hand, but then I don't know. She got some sort of shudder or had some sort of physical reaction and just had to rip it away. It was really interesting, and I sort of, just shrugged it off and smiled and said, all right, take care. Got the job. Then on the first couple of days, the manager and that senior manager were there, and they were both congratulating me on getting the job. And my manager, the senior manager was like, yeah, it's really great to have you here. And my manager said, well, you didn't want him. So that was interesting, right? So I was being sent signals from the very beginning. You're not welcome. You're not welcome. Not everybody here is your friend. I've talked about this in other episodes. And that manager said on the first day, I'll tell you right now, I'm not your friend. Be careful who you tell about your lived experience. And another event, the other event that really sticks out to me is when someone from the senior management team came to the ward with two very large trays of very fancy sandwiches. Gourmet catering sandwiches, prawn cocktail sandwiches, all of that stuff. Really nice sandwiches, right? And I fucking love a sandwich. I'm a sandwich guy. I'm a huge sandwich guy. So it was just me in the staff room and this senior manager. She brought these in. She said, hey guys, we've just had a meeting at head office and these are left over, so the plebs can have what the king didn't eat kind of thing. That's not what she said. That's how I took it. And someone else on the ward came in and said, oh, what are these? And the senior manager explained, and the staff weren't particularly interested in these sandwiches. So I said, oh, I'll put one out in the dining room. And the senior manager looked absolutely disgusted and said, don't give them to the patients. And that has always stayed with me. If you've ever been a psychiatric inpatient, you will know that the food is dog shit. It's awful. It's cooked in a weird contraption called the burn lodge or something like that. It's a sort of somewhere between an oven and a microwave. It just kind of steams food or something. It's something to do with food hygiene practices and infection control. But the food is pretty bad. Yeah. It's gotten better in the last 10 years. In my sort of most recent clinical post, I've noticed that the food is greatly improved. But back then, this was 10 years ago, the food wasn't good. And my thinking was, having a decent sandwich might mean the difference between, someone, you know, making an attempt on their life or not. But what was really significant about that was that there was this very clear communication of disdain. Like, it would be a waste to give these lovely sandwiches to those people. So, and this was a senior person. This is someone who'd been a mental health professional for a number of years, So yeah, there is stigma toward people with mental health problems within NHS mental health services. And there are a lot of complex questions that arise about that, Is that an attitude that the person had before they joined and it never changed? Or is that an attitude that they developed over time because of factors like burnout and things like that? I remember another example, actually. I was talking to a patient in the smoking area, and he was talking about his problems, and I said, we're all in this together, as a way of communicating that, I was with him in his experience. And the healthcare assistant who was stood next to me, who was an agency healthcare assistant, said to me, I think the more you work in this area, the more that perspective will be challenged. And that always struck me as significant, because I think he was coming from a place of much more burnout. I eventually burnt out, absolutely. And, because I was, I was trying to stay well, and I was coming up against a lot of things. So, yeah, those are just some illustrations, I think, from my experience of what you might see and hear in NHS services.